Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Let's talk about yesterday. Really weird match. I've seen an absolute massive range of emotions going on across social media, even coming away from the game. Let's start with the biggest kind of point of the day, VAR. I don't know about you guys, I'm just probably bored, quite frankly, of all the chat about it. I must admit, full disclosure, I'm never really a big VAR fan. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand it. I get the point behind it. I get the trying to aid the referees. But for me, it's kind of just doing everything that we were worried, or any critics were worried that it was going to do. It's slowing down the game. It's still very subjective in certain points. It's just a bit crap, quite frankly. Yesterday was just probably the worst example, And don't get me wrong, this isn't a Spurs thing, because Spurs have benefited from VAR calls, obviously, Champions League, Man City this season. But just for me, let's look at that kind of the big one, the Serge Aurier goal. Everyone thought it was a goal. No one had even questioned it, except the guys in a VAR room looking at the screens because of Son Heung-min's involvement earlier on in the move. It suddenly came up that VAR was checking. Everyone in the press box was a bit like what? Like, exactly why? Why is this being looked at? No one could kind of work out where it could have been along the line that something was being looked at. We're trying to think of handballs, anything like that. And then obviously it suddenly came up on the screen. And you could just see, obviously, you've all seen the photos and the footage now, this kind of little thing where they're trying to line it up, and you've got like two little lines going down as well, and trying to work out. And I'm sorry, but if we are now judging offsides on whether someone's armpit hair pokes out and is slightly ahead of the other person, then, game's gone, hasn't it, quite frankly? It's just madness. It's like, whatever happened to kind of the benefit of the doubt? I think VAR has maybe destroyed that. It's this kind of thing about now we have to be so exact, so to that kind of measure where, for me, and I know a lot of this is due to the new handball rule as well. It's not just VAR. I know the handball rule, the offside rule, that any part of the body, just a fraction, can be offside. For me, I don't understand how, I don't know, whatever it was, at the tip of Son's elbow, what it actually was, you're not going to score with your elbow. VAR is actually going to ensure that you're now not going to score with your elbow. You're not going to score with any part of your body that isn't a legal part of your body to score with. So if his elbow is ahead of the other person, if a fingernail was ahead of the other person, does it actually make any difference? There's nothing to be gained from that at all. For me, it was just the weirdest thing. And as they were putting it up, I had one of the guys, like the club member of the staff at Spurs, who just said they're gonna disallow it. So you can just see they're taking so much time over it, they're gonna disallow it. And he was right. What was it? 2-3 minutes. Everyone's waiting for a decision. And for me, that's another big part of this. Is like football. The cool thing about football is just this flowing game that just doesn't stop. It's relentless, it's physical, it's bang, and it just, VAR sucks all of that out of it in really big moments. And for someone, obviously when you're kicking around your mates, or, obviously I never played at a high level myself, but even in our Sunday league football and stuff like that, you score a goal, it's the greatest thing, isn't it, quite frankly? You can run off and celebrate. VAR pretty much has almost made that redundant now. We're going to get to a point now, there's going to be so many obvious kind of VAR checks that everyone's knows going on. We know they happen all the time, but there's actually now going to become to a point where the players are just going to kind of stop celebrating. We're going to have this really awkward thing where the ball goes in the net, and the crowd and the players are all going to be like looking around, looking up at the screen, looking at the referee, trying to work out what happens next. Because, it happened early on. Obviously, Leicester had that goal ruled out as well as Ndidi, wasn't it? Put the ball in the net, and everyone set up again for the kickoff. Leicester players were in their half, Spurs players were in their half, and then suddenly we all realise, oh, they're checking VAR, and obviously VAR, people that support it will quite rightly say, there were 4 Leicester players offside, and the goal was ruled out. But then we had the same scenario where Gazaniga had the ball, it hadn't gone up for the kickoff, so he was like, well, quick, and rolled it out to Toby Alderweireld, and all the Leicester players were still in their own half. So Spurs actually got a weird advantage because of the whole nature of the VAR delay. Don't get me wrong, in certain aspects I do think it works. I think there's elements maybe of the handball thing that there's elements still of that don't quite work, but on the whole, I do see areas it does help. But I'm sorry, if you are going to go down to those kind of ridiculous centimetres, and bearing in mind the people that kind of have created it have also admitted that they can't tell the exact point that a ball is kicked for a pass because I think it's the frame rate. They either can get it just as they're about to kick or just after it's kicked. And we're talking about like a split second. But obviously a split second in football, that can be the difference between an armpit hair or an elbow or whatever. So Son may well have actually been onside at the point the ball was kicked. So how you can make a definitive decision to say that there is clear and obvious way that you can overrule the referee's decision to give a goal, I just don't understand it. I just don't understand it. And quite frankly, I'm going to have to move on from VAR because otherwise we've already spoken like 6 minutes about it already and I could keep on going because it's something that I just... I like my American sports as well. I like NFL, but that's very much set to be the way it is with all these breaks. Football, Premier League, it's not meant to be like that. It's supposed to be a game that has highs, lows, emotions, never stops, absolutely pummeling you every minute. Not these stupid long breaks while everything's checked. Oh, getting annoyed about it just now, even talking about it, which is ridiculous. Pochettino spoke about it afterwards. He was... He's quite interested in the way he's done it. It's not a cop-out in a way, but it's not great for fans to kind of want to hear if you're really angry and emotional. But I think because he, like me, was someone that very much beforehand said it isn't going to work. It's going to break up the play. It's going to affect the natural rhythm of a match. But then he changed that once it came in to say, look, we've accepted it now. We've all agreed that it's going to come in. We now can't moan or complain about it. We have to abide by what happens with it. So he's now flipped to just accepting it. I don't know whether part of that was the ban he got, obviously after his alteration with Mike Dean last season, whether he now just plays it slightly safe with the FA because he doesn't want to get in trouble. I mean, I asked him a couple of weeks ago about Mike Dean and he wouldn't say anything. He said, I'm not allowed to talk about referees. So clearly there's a part of him now that doesn't want to court controversy, get fines, touchline bans, anything like that. It's kind of frustrating because I suppose maybe it's coloured by my own views on VAR, but you do want them to get a little bit angry about it. But anyway, we've spoken a long time about VAR, so we won't keep on rattling on VAR. Let's talk about the actual Pochettino himself, as we're on the subject of him. After the game, he was getting it. He was absolutely getting it in the neck across social media, everything. I'm wary of even bringing it up because it's so ridiculous, but July, was it July? Even maybe going into August, we had the hashtag #BackPoch. I get what it was. It was to get Daniel Levy to spend money, but ultimately the message was #BackPoch. Maybe not even 2 months later, month and a half, hashtag Poch out was trending. Not highly, but there was a moment where it was trending after the match. How you go from hashtag #BackPoch to hashtag Poch out within 50, 60 days is just incredible. And I think it sums up maybe social media, maybe just the aspect now of where we have an immediate way to vent our kind of feelings or emotions after a match. And sometimes there's less pausing to actually think and reflect. And don't get me wrong, Mauricio Pochettino makes mistakes. He's a relatively young manager. He is still very much learning the trade, as all managers are. He makes mistakes. There's things he does that are a bit strange. Tottenham's form in 2019 hasn't been great. The away form has been particularly atrocious. It's 9 matches now without a win since January the 20th. That's poor. That is poor. But to even be at a stage where people are contemplating Poch out, it's just a bit like VAR to me. It's just that I just don't get it. If there's anyone that's got credit in the bank right now as a manager, it's Mauricio Pochettino. This guy has took Spurs to 3 consecutive top 3 finishes, finished in top 4 last year, while delivering the club its first ever Champions League final appearance. He's worked in one season. He had 3 different stadiums. His team played in. He had to kind of cater for a club that wasn't spending any money in the transfer market. It didn't have a proper home. Literally, kind of scraping together these and kind of developing these really young, talented players because the club weren't buying players, but yet still competing with these top teams. Obviously, everyone wants silverware, everyone wants trophies, everyone wants league title wins, but you've also got to kind of understand, how did I put this without, I don't want to sound patronising because it's not, because I totally understand some of the frustrations, but I think it's a case of where Tottenham are at, where they were, the finances involved, and the job he's had to do and the job brief he's had as well. And if you're going to look at that, I hate the expression. Someone used the expression, I don't know if it was him or not, it might have been him, that sometimes, I think it was another manager, that sometimes doing what he's done is maybe better than a trophy. I don't like that expression because I think ultimately you are, in the long term, judged on silverware, but I do kind of understand the point that what he's achieved is ridiculous. I mean, Brendan Rodgers was saying it before the match, Roy Hodgson before the other. Literally every manager says the same thing. Is sometimes I think you can, because of the success he's brought, you can sometimes lose sight of what's happened behind, what's going on behind the curtain, as it were. And this is a guy that is essentially, he's like a manager and a fireman all in one. He's putting out fires all over the place to try and create something out of very little relatively compared to the other teams, and I think the success he's brought in a weird way has raised expectations among everyone, and sometimes you lose sight of the journey to get here, if you see what I mean. And I think it's that journey where Pochettino has really, really earned himself time to put things right. And when we say put things right, I think what we have to kind of look at as well is, yes, the form over 2019 has not been great in the Premier League. Champions League, obviously, the Champions League finalist, Tottenham Hotspur, just in case anyone forgot, that is quite incredible. And I think we were all in a bit of disbelief at the time. But in terms of Premier League, it hasn't been great. So I think what he has to do, he's got this real mantra about every season is different, every game is different. So I think if you look at this season, and that's what he'll be doing with the players, he won't be saying, look, guys, we've been crap away from home for the entirety of 2019. Or since January the 20th, he will be looking at it and saying, right, this season so far, we've lost 2 matches. It's only 2 matches. We're very early in the season. Performances haven't been great. We've had certain circumstances, the squad being unsettled, players not going, players going, players coming in, getting injured, things like that. He said, ultimately, right now, we've lost 2 matches. One of those was away, one of those was at home. The rest we've either won or drawn. I think that's the only way he can really take it right now. And I think if we look at that as the media or the fans look at that, ultimately right now, if you just on this season with its different circumstances, lots of weird stuff going on as well behind the scenes in terms of players who went or didn't go. It's just 2 at the moment. So I think it's a little bit early to start getting out the white, what is it in Spain, is it white hankies they kind of wave at matches at Real Madrid and Barcelona, places like that. It's still very, very early, and I think players have got to adjust. Tanguy Ndombele, for me, still needs a lot of time to adapt. He's shown little glimpses of what he can do, but he's still got to adapt. I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at him and I see a player that looks knackered from minute 1 to the end. I don't think he's entirely got into the whole hustle and bustle and physical nature of the Premier League yet, or Pochettino's sessions. You may have heard me say before, but when I interviewed him out in Singapore in pre-season, I said to Ndombele, what do you think of Pochettino's training sessions? Because they're supposedly so mad and tough. And he was just bearing in mind he'd spoken French for most of the interview and Sissoko was translated, he just turned to me and said in English, very hard. And with a big, on his face, as if to say it'd been a real culture shock. And he kind of went on to explain that a little bit through Sissoko, that it was just, he hadn't been used to it at all, the level of training. And it's not physical as well, just physical, it's mental as well. It's a real kind of a tough process the players go through every single day. And And so there's him, there's Lo Celso's injured, Sessegnon's injured. There are so many things where give it a little bit of time. There's a lot of run of games coming up that are much more manageable on paper. Obviously, we know we don't play the game on paper, but there's a little bit of a chance to get momentum, Bayern aside, and just kind of ease into the season a little bit more. I think there's a lot of panic going on. Well, I say a lot. We don't know whether it's a minority or not, but there's panic going on, certainly in some sectors of fandom. And I think maybe it's just see how the season kind of rolls out. I mean, if you were just going to look at it on paper, you could say that Spurs have drawn at the Etihad this season, which they didn't. They've drawn at the Emirates Stadium this season, which they didn't last season. The performances haven't been fantastic. They haven't been great at all in some circumstances, but that's just going to come on. The more time now Pochettino's got, now he knows all the players are here to keep moulding them. It's not quite as simple as sometimes I think we think it is. And that's, again, not to make excuses for him, because he does make mistakes, don't get me wrong. He has some funny ways about him. He's sometimes can be incredibly too honest in what he says, I think, in press conferences, which is coming from a journalist whose eyes light up when he says stuff like that, because obviously I get to write interesting stories about it. But I do think sometimes there's moments where he just needs to keep things indoors. I know there's a hell of a lot more that he will be saying to the players in private and says in public, but there's times, obviously, I just think he maybe just, I think sometimes he looks to set up, how do I put it? Set up kind of almost a reasoning for what he's done. Maybe excuses. So a reasoning behind things and why what he's doing is so tough, so hard, when maybe he just needs to crack on and people will be aware kind of what's going on. I mean, yesterday's match, we'll take it as an example. Afterwards, there's absolute hysteria on social media how awful Spurs were. Another rubbish performance on the road. But I was talking to this really pleasant, really nice chap in the train station, actually, on the way out of Leicester. And he was saying that, oh, God, there's another one of these games, it's just awful. He didn't deserve to win, didn't this, blah, blah, blah. And while I understand his frustrations, I kind of said to him, but if you actually look at the game, I mean, let's just take the VAR. VAR hadn't ruled out that goal, 2-0. Spurs are done. They're cruising. Most of the conversations that I had after the game now wouldn't be happening. Take VAR out of it. If you want to say, well, that was offside, so it's out. Let's take that out. Son missed two absolute pretty good chances when he was put through into the penalty area. Really should have scored those goals. It was a bit like the Son of old, the less clinical one with less confidence. Harry Kane, amazing goal, which we'll come to in a minute, but also had two other moments where he was put through or was in the box and had pretty simple chances made from 7-8 yards, and he hit little soft shots down the middle straight at the keeper. Spurs had chances to bury this match. They didn't play badly. It was a very open game. I think it was a real counter-attacking game. Actually, had it not had the madness at the end, I would have said actually it was a really entertaining game. Leicester just went in it like bang, straight from the start to go for it, and so did Spurs. Pochettino asked for, this is another thing, the fans are saying that Pochettino, the players aren't playing for him, he's lost the dressing room, all of that. Pochettino said after the match the other day, I want more intensity, I want more aggression, I want them to want it. They wanted it yesterday. You should have seen, if you hadn't seen maybe the highlights don't do it justice. Spurs players were clattering into challenges, absolutely thrown. There was a point where the King Power crowd was so angry, so heated up because of the challenges that were going in from everyone. Kane, Sissoko, Winks, Ndombele did a couple as well. Spurs absolutely were throwing themselves at this game, and they had some really nice attacking moves, and they could have scored a lot more goals. Don't get me wrong, Leicester had their chances as well, but I think Spurs really, by a certain point, could have had that game at 2-3-0, and we wouldn't be having these things. So I don't think you can lay all of that on Poch or say it was a bad performance. I just think the finishing was a bit rubbish, if I'm really going to boil it down to one thing. I still think the defence isn't quite settled. But I think a lot of defences are going to struggle with Vardy and Maddison and Barnes as well. I think a lot of them played really, really well, as in the Leicester players. And I think he still needs to settle on that back four. Aurier, for me, it was a more mixed performance this time. He had more defending to do, and I think he struggled in moments. I think he found himself out of position. There was one point in the first half where Pochettino very much said to him, "You have to stay back. You're just going to have to let others do the attacking," because you could tell he was going forward and they were just getting in down the right behind where he was every time. So I think there's a decision to be made. There's a part of me that still feels that he sees Juan Foyth as the right back for going forward. He's just waiting for him to be fit. We'll see. Kyle Walker-Peters clearly, he wasn't even in the squad yesterday. He'll play on Tuesday, but clearly the trust just isn't there. It just clearly is not going to happen, I don't think, unless there's more injuries and he gets another run and changes his mind. It just feels like for me that maybe that ship has sailed, which is sad really, because I think Kyle Walker-Peters has got a lot of potential. I think he just needs a run of games really. But yeah, I don't think we can lay this one on Pochettino. I said I was going to talk about it, so let's talk about it. The Harry Kane goal. Honestly, it was beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. People celebrate goals that are dribbles from one end of the pitch to the other quite rightly. Long distance strikes, amazing passing moves. For me, this goal was just about battling and beauty all in one go. Beautiful build up at the start, Sissoko and Aurier. The one time that Aurier was allowed to go forward and he kind of interpassing between them. The ball was knocked to Lamela. I was actually moaning from the press box because I felt he ignored an obvious pass off to the right, and I was absolutely wrong, because what he did instead was played this beautiful through ball in between, absolutely split the Leicester defence completely into Son's path. Son, incredibly clever, little back heel to Kane. Kane was walloped from behind, wasn't he? It was kind of a push and a tackle, and he just tumbled, and it was one of those where you just kind of thought, oh man, it's going to be one of those where he goes down, he has to claim for it, and he'll probably end up getting a free kick outside the box or something. But he didn't. He just improvised brilliantly, and it looks even better in slow motion. He just falling forward, and yet turns his body to swipe the ball in this kind of hook shot past Schmeichel. Honestly, I know other goals will win goal of the month. It's never even going to be considered up there, but for me, I thought it was a beautiful goal. I think it just said everything. And I think it was incredibly fitting as well with Harry Kane being someone that people say, dives and stuff like that. For a goal where he actually not dived, but as he fell, instead of appealing, his first thought was, I'm going to still smash this into that net. And he did. It was superb. I really, really enjoyed it. Another big moment in the match. This could be construed as a mistake Pochettino made. The Victor Wanyama substitution is one of those where, in hindsight, you can absolutely slate it. I still don't think it was quite the right decision, but I'll come to that in a second. Victor Wanyama, in case you didn't see anything in the game, came on within moments, lost the ball for Leicester to break and score their equaliser after the VAR decision. Then caught out of position with 5 minutes to go and just was so slow to get across and try to stop Maddison shooting what ended up being the winning goal. He looked pretty much like he's looked most of last season, very rusty, very off the pace. Passing was sloppy, tackles were kind of late and just wasn't good enough. However, I can see a lot of the people after the game were saying, why not bring on Eric Dier? I understand the thinking behind that, totally. However, Eric Dier's played no minutes this season either. Exactly the same scenario as Victor Wanyama. Hasn't played a single moment. So I think the decision between them was really negligible. It was like one or the other. They were both going to be incredibly rusty. I'd maybe say if there was one player, possibly if I was in his shoes and I'm no manager myself, that I maybe would have gone for Oliver Skipp. I know he's only turned 19 on Monday, but Oliver Skipp's played a couple of times this season so far, and Pochettino trusted to bring him on at the Etihad Stadium when everything was absolutely mad. And obviously it's Man City. Scored 8 goals yesterday, and he trusted Oliver Skipp to go in there as a 19-year-old. I think over Dier, and I don't even know if Wanyama was in the squad that day. So he clearly has that trust in him. So that, for me, was the one where maybe those fresh legs, the energy, and he's a bit more of a box-to-box player, Skipp, as well, that might have been a better option. But if you're going to... That's all in hindsight. If you look at it in the moment, This is a very experienced Tottenham player who formed with Moussa Dembele one of Spurs' best midfield partnerships of recent years. He's a Kenya international, the captain. This is a very experienced guy. As a manager, you're not expecting a guy who probably feels he should be playing for Tottenham Hotspur rather than almost leaving the club for Club Brugge. So if you're going to trust this guy, go out and show me what you can do. You're not going to think he's going to go out there and essentially it was a horror show. Let's be honest. You know, he was almost directly responsible for both of Leicester's goals. You can't legislate for a player coming on and absolutely being shocking. You can only give them that chance, and especially it's one that's done so much for you at Southampton and Spurs, and trust him. I don't think he will trust him again. I think that was his chance, and I think he's blown it, and I think he will go back to being, you know, one of the fringe guys. I think he might probably get some minutes on Tuesday in the League Cup, but I'd be stunned unless there's a big injury thing, a bit like Kyle Walker-Peters, whether we'll see that much of him. It was, yeah, if we're going to look at one mistake, maybe that's the one. But then, as I said, I don't think you can legislate for stuff like that. You know, this is a Premier League player that a couple of seasons ago everyone wanted. Just unfortunately, knee issues wrecked his kind of time at Tottenham. Pretty much only had that first season as his real season, good season, and he's struggled ever since for rhythm, for confidence. The vicious circle, really, isn't it? Because he needs a run of games to get that confidence back, but he's not going to get those run of games because in the 1 or 2 matches he'll play, he just doesn't look good enough. So yeah, that's kind of what it was. I'm probably not going to go on for much longer because I've spoken about it for ages. Sorry, just knocking the camera there. But we have to look ahead. That's all we can do. Next up, Colchester, just up the road from me, actually. It's quite handy to actually have an away game that's really not too far. I think we'll see some new faces. Or different faces. For me, as a journalist, I love that because I get to write all different stuff about different players. There's a real interesting angle to it. I think we'll see probably Troy Parrott make his debut. Whether he starts is another thing. I was trying to work out in my head. It depends whether he wants to rest Lamella and Son. If he wants to rest Lamella and Son, I think Troy Parrott starts. If he's happy to play one of those, then I think you have Eriksen, Dele and Lamella or Son behind Lucas. If he wants to rest both of those, then you could have, and I don't think he'd be scared to do it, have Lucas, Eriksen and Dele behind Troy Parrott. 17-year-old kid. Massive for him that would be. However, against a League One side, you know, I don't think it would be a tall order. And I don't think it's televised, is it? So I don't think it's smashing him or throwing him into the public eye quite too much for his debut. But there's still a part of me that maybe feels it'll be a substitute appearance. But I think his debut will come. Japhet Tanganga, we might see him possibly. I'd imagine maybe you're more likely to see in central defence starting. Davinson Sanchez. If Juan Foyth is fit, maybe he starts. If not, possibly Eric Dier plays there. And you have Wanyama and Oliver Skip in the middle. I like games like this. I know ultimately they're not the big matches. They're not the kind of hustle and bustle of the Premier League. But I like to see these different players getting their auditions, their cameos, their opportunities. It really... it just livens it up for me, you know, and I like to see, he always, every single year, I think he's given a debut to a player in this round. We had Oliver Skip last year against West Ham, Tashan Oakley-Booth against Barnsley, I think it was, a couple of years ago. And it's just an exciting moment for someone to come in and make their mark. And anyone that's heard me talk or write about Troy Parrott knows that I believe this kid's got a hell of a lot of talent. It's just for him about keeping his head down, working hard, and... sorry to use a cliched term, but trust the process in a way and not get ahead of himself or believe he needs to be in there sooner rather than the time that they want him to be. And if he does all of that, I think it's going to be some player. And I'll be really excited to see how he does. He played 90 minutes the other day against Olympiacos, his under-19s in the UEFA Youth League. Scored a really good goal. Faded slightly in the second half, but it was incredibly hot temperatures. They were playing 3 o'clock on an Athens afternoon in front of the Acropolis, and it was boiling. It was really hot. But so he'll have that in his legs. So he'll be fit enough. If you wanted him to start, he could play an hour. I just think Pochettino, especially after what he said to me, was it a week ago or so, about kind of keeping him out of the spotlight for now. maybe it's more likely to be a subs appearance. But if we get to see him, I wouldn't be shocked if he takes his chance. If something comes up, and when was the last time we had a Spurs debut with a goal from a young academy player? I'm struggling to even think. Hopefully, one of you will say in the comments below. I'm trying to think if Harry Kane. I don't think Harry Kane did score in his debut, did he? Didn't he miss a penalty? Was it in the Europa League? Someone will tell me. I don't know it all. I don't know a lot. But I'm really excited to see whether he plays a part. And then obviously we've got elsewhere. Ben Davies will come in. Walker Peters. Probably Gazaniga start again because Hugo Lloris obviously has just become a dad for a third time, and I don't think he would have played anyway. And matches like this are always really interesting because teams have got something to prove. It's a good stadium as well, Colchester have got. We're not talking about a ropey pitch in the middle of January when it's been absolutely ruined. So it'll be a good surface for good passing football. And it'll be an interesting match. Hopefully Spurs will take a good travelling contingent. I think Colchester's got a bit of a Spurs element to it. I think there's quite a few fans up that way. So I'd imagine there'll be a healthy contingent there. It should be a good game. But Spurs need to get back on track. They just need to start finding their rhythm, and I think it will come. We saw it against Palace in the first half. There were flashes of it against Leicester. I think Olympiacos was probably the one for me that was probably a really disappointing performance. But I saw enough against Leicester suggest that they're still all in there. This isn't a split camp. This isn't a worst case scenario that we're seeing among some fans at the moment. I think it's just a case of focusing now, deciding on who plays, because obviously the matches come thick and fast. We have a midweek match every week pretty much, with Champions League obviously coming back as well. Just a case of getting everyone's thoughts in the one direction and not the band. And Pochettino, I think, settling on he can't really, it's a difficult one. We all wanted to settle on a starting 11. His strongest 11 is always the phrase, isn't it? But with many matches at the moment, he's not being able to do that. He's having to split it up. He's having to create almost two different teams with different blends and balance to it. And that in itself does cause, issues with kind of continuity and momentum. But he's done it in the past. He has done it in the past. He's managed to create almost two teams. You remember, I don't know if it was last season, maybe the one before, where every other game was different fullbacks. And everyone was, oh my God, why aren't you playing your best ones? But it actually worked. It kept it fresh. There are two positions in the team where they do the most running. They're wingers, defenders, everything all in one. And I think he needs to get back to that. If he's going to have two different teams, find the right blend between them. And obviously you've also got to think about the right blend for different opponents. It's quite hard, but all managers have to do it. That's what they get paid the big bucks for. On big bucks, can people stop saying that Spurs are going to sack Pochettino as well? First off, as I said before, he's got so much credit in the bank. He's done so much to help Daniel Levy's project and all that. He's not getting sacked anytime soon at all. And secondly, the guy's on reportedly 8.5 million a year, and he's still got 3.5 years, is it, left of that contract? Almost 4 years. They're not going to spend that sort of money. You have to pay up the entirety of the contract if he gets sacked. Unless he did something incredible that voided his contract, which he's just not going to do. Spurs aren't going to pay that sort of money. Almost 25, 30 million to get rid of a manager, and then more for his staff, and then pay to bring in another manager with all his staff, and then lay out in the transfer window for that new manager all of his new faces and all of that. It's just not happening. If Poch walks, that's a different thing. I still can't see it myself. I think we'll get to the end of this season and he'll assess where everything's at and who wants him and what Spurs want from him, what Spurs can provide. But I don't think he's going anywhere anytime right now. So I think everyone just kind of has to focus on where we're going, as in player-wise. Fans can do what they like. I know I'm saying don't talk about Pochettino getting sacked or anything, but because I just think for me it's just not kind of logical. But it's football. It's football. Everyone's got an opinion. And for the team now, it's just about getting back on track, getting some of those injured players back. I think Ryan Sessegnon would be a big kind of addition. A really kind of a young, hungry, pacey, attacking threat who can also play in defence. I think that would give Pochettino a lot of options as well. I don't think he entirely trusts Lucas Moura yet, as we can see from the minutes he's getting right now. People always slate me for my Lucas Moura views, so I'm not going to go into him too much other than just say I think Pochettino wants more from him. He scores goals, but I think his all-round play, his assists and his play for others, it's just not there yet. Hopefully it will, because I think he could be an incredible player for Tottenham if it all comes together in a complete package. Son used to be the same, and now Son is, other than his misses yesterday, is now more of a complete package. And I think Lucas just still has to get there. I've completely lost my chain of thought because I went off on a Lucas Moura one. But I just think he's got to settle. He's got to settle a bit more on his thinking, Pochettino, who plays when and where. And it just needs a couple of results, doesn't it? And then it snowballs. The momentum, the confidence, everything comes back and the team starts firing again. Spurs have these periods every season. Just for Spurs this season, it's come earlier. Yet they've only lost 2 games. It's not a crisis. It's just a little hiccup that they've got to kind of get over. I know the form goes back to last season, but I think, like I said, we need to take it as just this season for now. If it keeps on going, there's an issue. And certainly I think players go before the manager myself. I think it's the players that he will say, well, they were leaving anyway, and the club or the player didn't want them to leave, couldn't get rid of them. I think that's kind of where it more lies. I think the players probably have less power than the manager at Tottenham right now, other than a couple, maybe Harry Kane. So yeah, I've waffled on for long enough. I shall leave you now. Obviously, Tuesday night match, there's no press conference ahead of it. Pochettino held that after yesterday's game in some embargoed stuff, which you will see tomorrow night, so keep an eye out for that. Little tidbits in there. Nothing absolutely major, but just some little interesting things maybe about the match and how he's going to set up. So keep an eye on that. And I shall talk to you again after the match. See you later.